Okay, welcome to Biology Module 14, Part 1. We're going to get into botany today. If you have your books handy, you should get, even if you don't have them handy, you should have them for the video, so I'll give you 1/2 of a second to go get your video, go get your book. There you go, you got your book. Okay, so we're going to move through. I'm going to reference the book at times because the drawings in the book are better than my drawings on the board. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at mrc@mrcscience.com. So this is going to be a 2-part video, so make sure you look for both parts for this week. We're going to talk about botany. So we're out of the animal kingdom for now, and we're going to move into botany. Botany is the study of plants. So basically how to identify and classify plant life. So first thing that it breaks it down into is 3 categories. Oops, can't spell. Perennial, annual, and biennial. Or not E, biennial. Biennial, okay. Basically, perennials are plants that are always there, year-round. They don't go through a cycle of death and renewal. Most obvious example of that are trees. Our trees hang on for a long time. So, annual, as you can guess by the name, are around for 1 year. They grow from a seed or a bulb or something similar, and they live for a year and then they die. And they scatter their seeds. Biennial, what can you guess? From the bi means 2, so 2 years. They have a 2-year cycle. Generally, the first year is growth, the second year is reproduction. So, know those. Within the plants themselves, we're going to talk about plant anatomy. So there are basically two types of tissues. The first type is reproductive. So they're reproductive organs. Guess what those do? They help and reproduce. Pretty much the flower, cones, and evergreens, things like that are the reproductive organs. Everything else is called vegetative. I can't spell. Called vegetative. That's everything else. Okay. You'll work your way through that. We're going to get into different types of tissues, though. These are the organs. The tissues are a little bit different from what you're familiar with animal life that we've gone through, and microscopic organisms. Okay. Basically, we have different types of tissues. We have ground. We have meristematic. Okay. We have dermal. And we have vascular. We'll leave ground for last. Meristematic tissues are growth tissues. You'll see meristematic tissues in most plants around. If you do a cross cut of the stem or the trunk, in this case of a tree, there's an area of cells just below the surface that divide and grow so that the plant, the stem, grows outward. These also elongate a little bit, but most of it is outward growth. If you go to the roots, you see the root hairs and roots. At the ends of these roots and root hairs are areas that you'll have a root cap generally, which is just dead cells, and then you'll have a meristematic region. And I probably just wrote below the video. If you got your books handy, though, go ahead. We're going to jump forward, and we're going to turn to page. I'm almost there. Turn to page 444. Page 444. Here's a picture of an onion root tip. That root tip has the root cap at the bottom, and then the meristematic region just above that. That's where all the cell reproduction goes. and duplication, and then we have the elongation as the cells grows, and then we have the maturation region, or the region where they're already grown, they're as big as they're going to get, and now they serve other purposes. So meristematic is growth. It also happens on the ends of the stems. They grow that way as well. And at the very top of many trees is a meristematic region that if you cut it off will stop them from growing up. Okay, let's move back. Okay, dermal region. Dermal sounds familiar to you, probably because you've heard it as skin. It is the outside growth. On the trees, it's the bark. It's a waxy layer on the outside of some plants to retain water, to keep it from losing water. Vascular is what it sounds. Vascular is movement of fluids. Plants do not have blood, they have sap. They have two types of vascular tissue. They have xylem and they have phloem. Xylem flows up from the roots to the rest of the plant. Phloem flows down from the top down. Xylem is primarily water, nutrients from the soil, minerals, things like that go up that the cells need. Phloem is primarily fluid, water just to help it flow, but primarily carbohydrates produced through photosynthesis to carry to the rest of the plant so that it can either store it or use it. So easy way for me to remember that is water flows downhill, phloem goes down, so that's the way I remember that. I will talk a little bit more about this in the next video of how xylem works and how transpiration, evaporation from the plants helps that water flow up, because plants do not have any kind of pumps like a heart. Okay, so let's talk about identification or classification of plants. Most plants have leaves. We'll just kind of look at the tree leaf here, but there are other types of leaves as well. So leaves are classified in different sections. We got our blade, we got our petiole, which is the stem basically of the leaf, goes from the actual stem up to the leaf. Sometimes on a leaf you'll have, against the stem at the base of the petiole, you'll have one or more stipules, which are basically just little leaves or buds, or bud shell. Not all plants have these. And finally you have what's called the apex of the leaf. So those are the basic leaf structure. They're gonna, in your study guide and on your test, is gonna be some leaf identification. Not identifying what plants it is, but what type of leaf it is. So they use a few different things for leaf identification. Go ahead and turn in your book to page 432 and 433. There's some leaves you can draw better than I can. You see a simple leaf with its blade, apex, and petiole. So simple leaf is just basically one petiole to one leaf. One petiole off the stem to one leaf. The compound leaf still has the petiole, but now it has multiple leaves on it. So multiple leaves on the same petiole coming off the stem is a compound. And this is simple. You should be familiar with compound and simple from things like the eyes of a spider and things like that. Okay. So that's one way you can identify as a compound or simple leaf. Next thing you can do is identify the leaf placement on the stem. If you look down below that, you have our alternate with our stem and our leaf and our leaf and our leaf and our leaf. They alternate. They are not across from each other. Opposite, and so this is alternate. Opposite, they are across from each other. Boom, 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 boom. And then you've got the whorled. Whorled, basically they wrap around the stem. A bunch of leaves wrap around the stem. So those are the three different leaf placement things that you'll have to identify on the study guide and the test. Okay, then we get into leaf identification itself. There are different parts of the leaves that we identify. First thing we identify on is the shape. You see a bunch of different shapes there: linear, elliptical, oval, deltoid. Deltoid versus cordate is sometimes a little confusing. A deltoid will look like this. A cordate will look like this. The difference is here. The deltoid is flat, while the cordate, is that CH? No, that's just cordate, is indented. Kind of looks like an upside down heart. Deltoid, if you've done any chemistry, physics, anything with change in, delta is a triangle, so that's why they name it deltoid. It's kind of triangular. Muscles in your on your body called deltoids are triangular. That's why they're called deltoids. So that's the first kind of confusing one. The next one that's kind of confusing is lobed versus cleft. Lobed, they look very similar. The main difference is how deep the little how deep these little clefts go into it. So lobed isn't very deep. A clefts also tend to be more pointy, but that's not necessarily true, although I think on the test they will be pointy, so that might be an easy way for you to identify it. Clefts on a cleft, so this is a lobed, this is a cleft. Clefts, they go in much deeper, much further in. So that's the main way to tell the difference between a lobed and a cleft. Needle-like, pretty standard. You're familiar with that with pine trees. Scaled, example of scaled leaves would be cedars. If you have cedars, if you take a look at their leaves, they look like little clumps of scales instead of leaves. Okay. The next part they identify leaves on is margin, the edge of the leaf. If the edge has no real undulation or anything, it's called entire. So here's another one that's kind of hard to tell. You got serrate and you got dentate. Really the only difference between these two is size. Serrate, if you think of a serrated knife, it has very small little teeth on it. Dentate, dental teeth. Got big teeth. That's the only way to really tell the two apart is by size. Undulate sometimes can get confused with entire, but entire you will see an obvious leaf shape. Undulate you will see it kind of waver. So entire, oh that's really bad writing, and undulate. So that's how you can tell those two apart. Okay, final one is venation, how the veins of the leaves. In your books it's kind of hard to see. You got to look close at those veins. They didn't do a good job at making them stand out. But venation, so we have three types of venation. Parallel. How you can recognize parallel is generally the leaf is going to be long and all the veins run from the bottom up the leaf. Parallel, all the veins run up. Okay. Pinnate. Pinnate, what you're going to have is you're going to have a leaf, generally a wider leaf. That's not very much wider. You'll have one main vein running up, and then you'll have veins running off it. It is pinnate. Palmate is pretty much everything else. What we do in palmate is the vein runs up and it breaks off from itself all over. You can still find the main vein, but you'll see other veins branching. That's what I was looking for, branching off. So palmate has branches. So that's how you can tell those three main pieces apart. Okay, so that's leaf identification. Will be on the test. Know your edges, your shapes, your venation, things like that. So if you have any questions, email me at mrc@mrcscience.com, and this is the end of part 1.